Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. I have very tight schedule hips and abductor, although I can squat below parallel with ollie shoes. I've been working hard on my flexibility as I've started grappling. Will increased muscle length affect my squatting? I've noticed on some days I can't control the bar path as well, or am I just tired from the additional weekly workload? You can't lengthen your muscles. Okay, I don't care what your Pilates teacher told you. I don't care what someone told you. You can't lengthen your muscles. Now, you can increase flexibility in joints to some extent, but here's the other thing to factor in. If you're worried about squatting too deep, let's say your goal is to maybe avoid some sort of pelvic tilt you're concerned with from going too deep, or you're concerned with losing the slack in the hamstrings by going all the way ass to grass, you could adjust your stance on your squat. Let's say you build the mobility to go 5 inches below parallel, right? Because you can barely get there now. Adjust your stance. You will find a stance that stops you at parallel no matter what you do. Your hips will physically stop you from going deeper. There'll be a stance width where you can do that. You can control depth with the width of your stance on your squats. So I wouldn't worry about that. Now, the reason you're struggling with control is, like you said, it's increased workload. If you're doing additional weekly workload and you haven't adapted to it, yes, you're going to struggle on some of your lifts sometimes. That happens. You guys see that happen with me. Because I film 6 workout days every week. You guys see how I adjust my training. You see when I've done stuff. I talk about when I've added cardio in, things like that. You absolutely see the effects. So, of course, that's part of what's going on. Why wouldn't it be? All right, next question. Should hook grip only be practiced pronated? If I'm doing some kind of neutral grip pull on a day I'm not deadlifting, is it safe and or meaningful to do a work set or two with hook and neutral? Much appreciated. That's not training the hook grip. Just because you have your thumb under doesn't mean that you're preventing bar roll. Now, if you're gripping some neutral handled chin-up bars, how are you doing a hook grip? You're like, well, I've got my thumbs under, but no, the bar can't roll. So if you're not going to get any grip training from that. I mean, as far as your hook grip goes, it's just not the same thing. The actual bar attempting to roll and the friction of your thumbs stopping it is what's going on with hook grip. And you're going to not have the bar roll issue with that grip, and it's going to be a much, much, much lighter weight than you would be using for a deadlift or anything else, or even force production on a heavy clean or something, because with those there's going to be that force being applied, right? That force of the explosiveness. You're not going to get the same effect, and you're not going to get that friction rub against the thumb. So if you're trying to practice the hook grip to toughen the thumb and the skin against it, I just don't see this working, because it is simply not really meaningful in the same way. You would probably do better just doing some lighter hook grip with a barbell that's capable of rolling a nice stiff bar that hasn't been bent, with lighter weight if you just wanted additional hook grip work, right? Just to toughen that up. But doing it on a neutral grip like that, no, because it's not the same. There is no friction from the bar trying to roll, because the bar can't roll in that position. So hopefully that makes sense. You're not actually utilizing the real reason people are using the hook grip. It's there to stop the bar from rolling, right? You're using your thumbs to create friction. Totally different animal. All right, next question. I'm about to start your Ice Cream Fitness 5x5. Could I swap flat bench with incline and back squat to front squat due to old sporting injuries that don't allow me to do them two lifts efficiently? Cheers. No, man, you can't swap those out. You're not going to get the same training effect. Absolutely not. And that's kind of a weird thing. What sporting injuries have you gotten that exactly stop you from doing a flat bench but allow you to do an incline, stop you from doing a back squat that allow you to do a front squat? Just say, that seems a little bit weird. I would want to know more about these specific sporting injuries, because if you've had any sort of shoulder problem or anything else, I would imagine the incline might actually be more problematic than a properly done flat bench. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think done correctly, the flat bench is going to be easier on your shoulders than an incline if you've suffered some sort of shoulder issue in the past. So I'm not sure what would be going on there. And again, the back squat versus the front squat. Again, what injuries are we talking about here, brother? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to be flat honest with you. I think you're making excuses because you just don't want to do these harder lifts. I think that's what it comes down to. You're going to do these slightly easier lifts, and I'm not saying front squats aren't great. I'm not saying the incline bench isn't a great movement. They're both fantastic exercises. But if your goal is to maximize size and strength, they're going to be a little bit inferior to the other two. They're going to be a little bit inferior. And believe me, I'm not saying they don't have their place. They're absolutely fantastic supplemental lifts. Fantastic supplemental lifts. That can do tremendous things for certain people. They're not direct replacements, though. Particularly if you're trying to maximize your muscle mass gains. They're just not direct replacements. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, I have a good question. Do you believe that replacing the big three with deficit deadlifts, pause squats, and closed grip bench press would produce the same hypertrophy and strength gains? I am also training for boxing and MMA nearly every day, so I need exercises that are easier to recover from. What's your opinion on this? Keep up the good work. It depends on what you're talking about for recovery. As far as axial loading goes, system-wide recovery, yeah, they're going to be better off. They're going to be better. I find that pause squats beat my quads up a lot more personally. So if you're really dealing with quad recovery, I don't know if pause squats are going to be the way to go. They're tough on my thighs. They're tough on my quads in terms of recovery for me personally. But if you're talking about just overall systemic recovery, yeah, they're going to be slightly better. And for what you're doing, I think it's fine. I think they're fantastic for hypertrophy. I see no issue there. The only difference you're going to have is that if you want to get better at the main lifts, you are going to need to practice those. I think in terms of just overall size and building a strength base, I think those three variations as replacements, I think they can do just fine. I think they're great exercises. I've clearly done my fair share of them, right? I mean, I close grip bench now even still. I'm a big believer in that as far as building your base. Because it allows you to get a longer range of motion with a lighter weight, and it's easier on the shoulders. But again, that much longer range of motion, I think, has more potential for hypertrophy. And the other two, again, you're just getting a reduced axial loading, and in the case of the deficits, a slightly longer range of motion. Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine for that. But just keep in mind, if you want to get really, really good at the competitive variations, you will need to rotate them in eventually. You'll need to rotate them in eventually, but you know, it's not something you have to do all the time. But I do think for a lot of programs, those three variations are absolutely acceptable substitutes, particularly in higher volume phases of training, right? Because you can get away with slightly higher training volumes and still recover from those. And for hypertrophy, that can be a pretty big deal. Yeah. All right, next question and last question of the week. Jason, could you do a video on carb rinsing, the new trend that soccer players are doing in the World Cup? Think it could be a valid topic for a channel of your caliber, and you could give your take on it and its effects, and maybe using it in strength training endeavors for maximum performance workouts such as powerlifting in between sets. Thank you. Your channel's great. I don't need to do a whole video on this trend. We can do it in just a Q&A and cover it in a couple minutes. This is another example of people taking research completely out of context and doing really stupid stuff and carrying it over to elite level sports. Okay, I've seen the research on this because this came up in the last couple weeks, and so I was looking at this a couple weeks ago. The research says it works, but it doesn't work. You know, just like I talk about the mind-muscle connection versus bar speed, mind-muscle connection works better than moving a bar slow and not focusing on anything, right? It doesn't work as effectively as lifting a weight explosively with good form. Well, here's the same thing when we get over the carb rinsing thing. When compared to people who are fasted, carb rinsing has very clear measurable benefits in performance, right? Versus performing, training, exercising, competing fasted. Absolutely. But do you know what the same research found? That eating actual carbs and swallowing them actually produce an even better training and performance response. You see the problem there? It's like, oh man, this carb rinsing, it produces some effect. It produces part of the effect actually consuming the carbs does. Not all of it, but it beats being fasted. So let's do that. Well, that's well and good till you start competing against a guy who ate some carbs. And if all other factors were equal, you have the same skill, same energy, everything else. The guy who actually eats the carbs is going to outperform you on the carb rinsing. You see what I mean, guys? People take research out of context. Yes, it is better than being fasted. But it's not as productive in terms of recovery, performance, training effect, muscle growth, any of that, as actually swallowing the carbohydrates instead of spitting them out. And that's what the data shows. Madness, guys, madness. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.